Hey, welcome to a new episode of Skin in the Game. This is your host, John Simperman, with my co-host,
Tim O'Shea. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
So, Tim, we have some really interesting topics, really tied to some really interesting guests today. So, we're going to have the founder and the lead producer from FloSports.
Which is great because we're going to get to combine, John, a whole bunch of things you and I love. First of all, multiple sports.
Right.
We're going to go deep on multiple sports.
A few sports we've never touched on this
No,
program.
yeah. In fact, I think the majority of the sports we're going to talk about today, it may be the first time they're mentioned in any kind of depth on this show or most sports business shows, because these are not sports that you typically hear about in terms of, big dollar or big viewership or having any kind of significant audience, but they do. And FloSports knew that, and Mark Floreani from FloSports, who we'll tell you more about in a minute, knew it about 20 years ago and was way ahead of the game. But we're also gonna get into this, like the sports broadcasting, or in this case, streaming.
Right.
And see just what exactly is FloSports doing for 2 decades now that has built up what is an incredible business, and which doesn't involve having to flick on your TV, subscribe on cable. Again, these were early adopters and people who really dominated the space.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. Mark Floreani, who will be our guest along with Mark Bader, he was the co-founder of FloSports. And for those of you who are not aware of it, FloSports was launched in 2006. They were streaming live sports before streaming became cool. So really, early on with the advent of streaming and the internet, and what we're going to dig into is just amazingly how they've grown it and all the different sports that are really what I would call underserved, underexposed. They're bringing these second and third tier sports and giving them the coverage that they really, really deserve.
Yeah, and you're talking about in terms of like the public's knowledge. So these are sports, and we can name some here. These are sports that people love to participate in. If you are, if you're a participant, and if you have a kid or someone in your family who participates, you become a big fan of the sport. But if you're outside of that, you're more likely to know it exists, or maybe you could see it in the Olympics and maybe don't give it as much thought. And FloSports saw that there's an audience out there for these sports. So among others, track and field. Mm-hmm. Wrestling.
Wrestling's really the kind of the original story that needed to be told.
Yeah. Cheerleading is another one, and the list will go on. Hockey. Now, hockey's not. NHL. Hockey is not a sport that the common fan isn't aware of. I think everybody could name at least a few great hockey players, even if you're not a fan. But there's a lot more to hockey than the National Hockey League, right? And FloSports caught that earlier too. There's something too to put this in context for people, John. I'm thinking 2006 when FloSports started. This is before everybody was walking around with a smartphone. This is, I forget if it's the earliest days of the iPhone or pre-iPhone, but I can tell you this is the time when BlackBerries were the thing. Barack, not to date this whole thing too much, but Barack Obama was elected president, and they had to take away his BlackBerry, not his iPhone, for security purposes. All of this is to say people were not streaming sports on their phone. If they were streaming, they were doing it on a computer. So to launch a business in this space took some real guts and some real insight back in the day.
Right, and as we're going to learn, this was really a network, or they were founded by athletes. So they knew there was a hole to be filled. They filled it. I was first introduced to FloSports. I've been in and around the sport of wrestling, more so tertiary, and very close to what I would think in many ways is the first family of wrestling in New York State, the Dake family, both Doug as well as his Olympic wrestling son Kyle. So I was introduced to FloSports, maybe early on, and it's really great to get their founders on the air here with us on Skin in the Game. Real quick before we go to our interview, what are you seeing trend wise? What sports do you want to talk to the guys about most?
Oh, we named a few already. Definitely hockey.
Yep.
Just given that we're coming to people from a part of the world where we're sitting on the edge of two countries here, where hockey's a big deal. So, hockey. I am curious about wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I really am. I'm curious to hear about the stories that Mark Bader has been able to tell. I've seen some of them. There's one I'm going to bring up to him about the Iowa Hawkeyes women's wrestling team and Mark's own daughter. So we'll get into that
Cool,
in the
cool.
interview. What else are you looking to get into?
I
with them?
think just again digging into them, the passions involved in the sports, and I also want to touch on with them what other trends do they see? What is next? They had the vision to launch Flow and to build programming around wrestling and track and field and
Racing is
yeah.
another one.
Well,
a
let's
big one.
see
Yeah.
let's see what's next. So with that, do stay tuned. We have Mark Floreani, the CEO and co-founder of FloSports. Also joining us, Mark Bader, senior producer and editor of FloSports. So stay tuned.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Skin in the Game. Mark Floreani, Mark Bader, welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Good to have you guys. Okay, now for everybody's ease, and I'm told you guys do this in FloSports too. Mark Floreani, we're going to call you Mark. Mark Bader, we're going to call you Bader, which is what everybody calls you, right?
Yep.
All right, so we got Mark, we got Bader. Here we go. Mark, you started FloSports quite some time ago, and right before we signed on air here, you and John were reminiscing, John, about how you remember FloSports way back in the day for you, right?
Yeah.
And Bader, I know you've been along for the ride, going back quite some time too. So let's tee it up by having Mark give us a little background on FloSports. How you got started and just a bit on that trajectory to today, and Bader, how you got hooked in with this so long ago.
Yeah, like I said, great to be here. FloSports is going to be 20 next year. FloSports is a media and technology company for sports that are usually overlooked. For example, like wrestling, cheerleading, track and field, jiu-jitsu. We stream over 50,000 events, produce hundreds of thousands of pieces of content and software for these sports. It started way back in 2006. I ran track at the University of Texas. My brother was a wrestler at Cal Poly, and we just believed that these sports had a passionate following, and the internet was going to change, and direct to consumer was going to change these sports for the better. And so we started way back in 2006. Didn't have much money back then. We started with $10,000 in a van, drove across the country, started filming athletes, posting it online. And we started that in track and field and wrestling. And I think a couple years later, we convinced people like Mark Bader to join. He didn't get paid much, but he did get to live in a van. So that was all fun for him. And today we're in 25 sports. We, like I said, stream 50,000 events, have over 600 partners, and streaming every day to millions of people.
So Bader, what attracted you to that van down by the river in Austin, Texas?
This is sounded, by the way, by like the origin story of every great rock band, by the way.
Yeah. Well, while Mark and his brother were out getting these videos and putting them on the internet, I'm a wrestling fanatic, right? And I'm looking to consume wrestling, and mostly forums was kind of how you did it back then. But like all of a sudden, this thing pops up, and there's a link to watch this video of this this one of the best wrestling coaches in the country, and I'm watching. I'm like, this is amazing. And then there's this site, I got it kind of, and I check it, and every day there's a new video. Like, what? This is insane. And one thing led to another. A college teammate of mine who was still wrestling at the time, his name's Ben Askren, was pretty popular and very successful wrestler. He got into knowing the guys at Flow Wrestling. They were looking to hire somebody. He threw my name out there, and one thing led to another. I was like, yes, let's go. And so I jumped in, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know much about cameras or computers or technology, but a passion for wrestling. And, each day they taught me one more little thing, how to plug the camera in, how to get the videos, how to record, how to edit. And then 17, 18 years later, here we are.
Wow. So Mark, Flow Sports 50,000 broadcasts or so annually. But so I just want to make sure our listeners know, did it really start around wrestling and track and field? What were those first broadcasts?
Yeah, it was wrestling and track and field. Like I said, I ran track and my brother wrestled, so we had connections in those communities, and we would just show up and stream track and field races and wrestling events. Kind of had a breakthrough in 2007. Went down to Houston for the half marathon, and Ryan Hall, who was an amazing runner at the time, broke the American record. And again, like what Mark said, back then in 2006, 2007, video on the internet was just getting started. And for people to see a full race was it was like blew their mind, and that really kind of got us in front of a lot more people, and we say like kind of broke the running internet at the time. Yeah, that was one of our big races. You talked about Kyle Dake.
Yeah.
Kyle Dake. We had Kyle Dake versus David Taylor, 2012. That was one of our first live wrestling matches, and that was what we called the match of the century at the time. And uh, really were pivotal moments in Flow Sports history.
Something I want to clarify for people, especially if they're listening on the radio and just tuning in. When we're talking about wrestling, we mean actual wrestling, not pro
That's
wrestling,
right.
right? And I want, for guys, this tees up another question that I want you to dig a little deeper on for our listeners and for our viewers. When you talk about sports that are traditionally overlooked, like track and field, like wrestling, like so many sports that Flow Sports has embraced. Being overlooked doesn't mean obviously that there is not an audience. Clearly there is. You guys have demonstrated that. Mark, how did you, whether it was instinct or research, how did you know that back then, that there would be a willing, large, and dedicated audience that could eventually be monetized for some of these sports?
Well, I think it was more instinct, being around the track and field community, my brother being around the wrestling community, and us talking to other people in other sports, and just the amount of passion. And yes, it's not, it doesn't have the audience of the NFL, but our theory from the beginning is that you're going to have a very passionate community that if you serve them, they'll be loyal. And if you stick a bunch of those communities together, you could create a pretty large enterprise. And if you've ever heard the theory of the long tail, even though it's very long and they're not as large, if you add it together, it's as big as the head of the tail. And so that was the theory of flow sports.
And I would agree, guys. It's not, it's kind of not the width of the audience, but it's the, how deep the passions are. And we talk a lot on this program of kind of tertiary sports in some markets, and even on a pro sports side, you look at the sport of hockey, for example. It may not have the widest reach, but when you talk about hockey fans, and by the way, Flow Sports, we're going to talk about hockey, but just those passions run so much deeper, and it doesn't have to be a tier one sport to have a huge following, and I think that's what Flow Sports is demonstrating.
Yeah, at Flow we call it the passion index, and hockey has a high passion index. Wrestling has a huge passion index. We say, hey, yeah, most likely everyone has their NFL team they're watching on Sunday, but on Saturday there's a good chance that they're at a cheerleading competition or a wrestling tournament in a gym, and so that's what we we align with.
Yeah. So on that, Mark, you mentioned that 50,000 or so broadcasts. Just for our listeners, kind of, what are the top two or three where you're seeing the most viewership?
Yeah, so it's 50,000 broadcasts from 4,000 different venues around the world. Our top two or three would be motorsports, wrestling, cheerleading, and I'll throw in hockey as well. Those are our largest and very passionate audiences.
Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit about motorsports. We're not talking necessarily NASCAR, the either the Busch Series or the Xfinity Series, but are these some of more of the grassroots events in motorsports?
Yeah, so we're not talking about NASCAR in terms of their top tier. We do work with NASCAR on some of their tier two and tier three partnerships. We also anything on dirt track racing, and even though we're not at the top of NASCAR, the NASCAR drivers are always on our platform. Kyle Larson just won the NASCAR championship, his second NASCAR championship, and he's partners of FloSports. We actually have a race series called High Limits, which is 60 nights of racing, and he's racing, countless times on Flow in middle America on a Saturday night or even a Friday night, and then flying into Daytona to race the NASCAR on Sunday. So we also have like people like Kyle Busch, who's a NASCAR champion, coming to these races. And again, if you're talking about passionate following, dirt track racing, short track racing. They are some passionate fans, and they're filling up stadiums all over the country, Friday, and Saturday night.
So for fans out there who have either heard of Flow Sports but not actually engaged yet with the content, which is, my fancy way of saying they haven't yet checked it out, they haven't watched it yet. When they get a subscription and they go into one of these verticals, again, my fancy word for they check out what you offer in one of these sports, just walk people through the basics here. There's competitions, there's reporting, there's content pieces. Beta, you've got some great work out there we want to get into. But what will people see? And from your end on the back, on the backside of that, who are you sending out to different events, and how do you put this together? How do you put together tens of thousands of pieces of coverage over the course of a year?
Yeah, so for the people that haven't subscribed, first you can go to our sites right now. You don't have to subscribe to watch the vast majority of our content, or you can go to our YouTube channels, Flow Wrestling, Flow Racing, Flow Hockey. But you get access to all 50,000 events, and we have top events in all the sports, all the way down to participatory and youth events. You get access to podcasts. Mark will talk a little bit about the documentaries that we're producing, and then we have data for these all these events, rankings, etc. So if you think about how ESPN covers college football, we're covering these sports with as much passion and energy, and trying to grow these sports every day.
More passion.
Yeah, more passion.
And I think we're going to get into more authenticity. I mean, you are, in some cases, Mark and Bader, I mean, you are investing in these properties to help grow participation, to help grow exposure. So why don't we get to that right now? Because I think, you talk about passion, but also authenticity. You have skin in the game with a number of these properties.
Yeah, and I'll let Bader, jump in here, but I will say from the beginning, our mission was to grow our sports every day. We love our sports. We compete in it. Tons of our employees are, college athletes, and we're just so happy that we get to stay in it. But we believe that these athletes and coaches deserve more. And if we tell their story the right way, we can grow these sports, and we're trying to grow the pie. And if you talk about the team that we have, Bader is a perfect example of authenticity. When he came on, he's not the most polished guy, but that's not what we want. We wanted him to be passionate about wrestling and get in there. And he bleeds wrestling. But I'll let Bader talk about his passion for wrestling.
And Beta,
Yeah, well,
Beta, I'm gonna interject with one because I want you to go there with what you talk about. As a dad, we're both dads. John and I, both dads of daughters. The piece you have where you expose your daughters to wrestling, incredible. So go where you were gonna go, but please go there too.
Yeah, I'll go there. The bleed passion, like I was saying, I'm a wrestler. I wrestled my whole life. I wrestled in college. I finished college. I'm coaching high school. I'm a wrestling nut. I'm consuming whatever I can. These videos show up. This is amazing. I'm all into this thing. This is great. You can hear from the top coaches and that. And then when the opportunity, like Mark said, the opportunity came to do it, I jumped at it. And now I didn't know how to do any of it except I knew the wrestling. And, obviously I've learned a lot over the years about, how this all works. But all the guys on the Flow Wrestling content team were wrestlers. And I wrestled this year in an old man's tournament. And we still get together and wrestle on the side. It's inside of us. It's what we know. It's what we love. It's what we bleed passion. So that part of it, yeah, and we're just being ourselves, and we're relatable, I think, to the wrestling community because we're part of it. You know, you asked Mark earlier, how did you know this was going to work? Well, because he's part of that community, and he knows there's a community there that's hungry for it. And then for the part with my daughter, yeah, so we do these documentary films as well. We did one on the Iowa women's wrestling team during their first season of competition, 2023 and 2024. And we made a multi-episode series, and they had a premiere for it in Iowa. They had an Iowa Women's Wrestling Academy where the women of any age could come have an experience on the mat. And then at the end of it, we were going to show we did show the first episode of our documentary. And I brought my 8-year-old daughter out there, and she had just an amazing time, an amazing experience. She got to wrestle with, Olympians and world champions and these people who she looks up to. And she just, it was a wonderful experience for her and for me too.
By the end of that, she spoke to you, Bader, about wanting to be a part of wrestling, correct?
Yeah. And she's still dad. What, I'm like, oh, pump the I'm not trying to get my kid. I want my kids to wrestle. I'd love it. But once you really jump into wrestling, you're kind of all in. So I'm like, let's just take our time. But yeah, she's more interested in wrestling now than she's ever been. And it was a lot to do with that, Mark, for sure.
And that's what we're trying to do every day, right? We know that NFL and college football, SEC football is on, and there's inspiration for countless, boys and girls to be a participant in these sports, but there really wasn't for our sports. And for, to create content to show how amazing and athletically talented and how much these people work in sports like wrestling, track and field, cheerleading, hockey, and giving that exposure. The goal is, yeah, that little brothers and little sisters of the kids that maybe are watching the wrestler or the cheerleader say, "Hey, I want to do that." I like seeing that there's recognition here because everyone loves recognition. If we can highlight those feats, we can grow that sport.
That's great. And speaking of the sport, and now that we've got Bader all fired up on wrestling,
Doesn't take much.
give us, what is the state of wrestling in North America? How is the sport doing? Where are we at with grassroots growth and participation? How are we doing, Mark?
I think wrestling's doing really well. We're seeing growth, and I think one thing that's speaking to my daughter, right? Like women's wrestling is new, right? Didn't come to the Olympics till 2004. When I was growing up, you might see a girl wrestler at a tournament once or twice a year. And it's just exploded. And, in 2012, the whole debacle with they were going to take wrestling out of the Olympics. And a big part of saving that was like, hey, make it equal. Bring more women's weight classes to the Olympics. Get more exposure in women's wrestling. And it's really just taking off and doing really well. And on the higher level, as far as like the competition side, Team USA is doing great, winning world titles and got a lot of fantastic wrestlers like Kyle Dake and others.
So we're in good
Yeah, and
shape,
I'd say
though.
that,
Yeah.
I mean, another thing is that the people don't realize that the college programs they have grown hundreds of college programs since 2000. And so I think that the sport is in a healthy place from the grassroots level. It's in a healthy place where women's programs are being added, men's programs are being added. And then on the elite level, the Americans are, in the top 3 in the world consistently, which I don't, that wasn't the case 20 years ago. And so the sport's doing well.
Are there sports out there that are following the opposite trend now, that are either on the downswing or at that kind of struggle point that wrestling was at but eventually emerged from?
The major sports, there are sports like football that are hurting a little bit. In general, sports are doing well. Youth participation is through the roof, maybe a little too intense sometimes. But these what the internet has done, and it's just made it a lot easier to get exposure here. And so the sports that were not thought of, like wrestling, like cheerleading, track and field, they're all growing at a nice clip. And then you obviously have new entrants like pickleball and lacrosse continues to grow.
Well, we're sitting here in Skin in the Game is produced here in Western New York, and we also have a lot of Canadian listeners. So We would not be doing our jobs unless we talked hockey.
Hockey.
And give us, Mark, give us an overview of the breadth of hockey programming on Flow Sports.
Yeah, we have the most amount of hockey, live hockey content in the world. We'll have over 20,000 games of hockey. We have some of the world's best leagues, basically the top leagues underneath the NHL. So we have the AHL and the ECHL that have been with Flow for a couple years now. We have the USHL, which is the top junior league in the United States. And then this year we just started with the Q and the OHL, which are two of the three CHL leagues, which we are really excited about. And we've just seen great viewership from those two leagues. So we have well over, close to 100 leagues of hockey. So if you are a hockey fan, you can watch hockey basically every day on Flow and some of the best athletes and up and coming stars in the world.
I'm going to mix metaphors a little bit here and ask you for the inside baseball on how you set up some of these rights deals with whether it's hockey or other sports leagues. But people have a sense of, at least some sense from reading, of what that looks like with with the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, WNBA, and so on. Those the major leagues. But you're working with the leagues, as you said, that are one or two or three notches below that. So I'm sure it's a mix. But are you coming to them? Are they coming to you? As best you can. What's the range of what those deals look like?
So we have well over 500 partnerships, and the deals look like a lot of different things. But I will tell you that streaming 50,000 events from 4,000 venues is hard. Producing content and marketing for all those leagues is quite a task that we've over 20 years have gotten pretty good at doing those hard things. And in the beginning, a lot of the time we were going to them. Now it's, as we continue to grow and Flow gets out there more, obviously more and more people hear about us and seeing what we've done with other leagues, they come to us. But we have uh, leagues getting some of our top leagues are definitely in the seven figures every year in terms of rights fees, and we're happy to do it because we know that that's helping grow those leagues.
I want to switch over to the storytelling aspect here. And Bader, I'm going to ask you this, through the lens of wrestling. As a journalist myself, I know when we're looking for great stories, a lot of it comes from talking to people in the sport in the locker rooms, but it also comes from reading or watching what other journalists are putting out there and looking for where the gaps are, looking for what more you might like to know. You're covering a sport that doesn't get nearly the coverage that some of the major pro sports do. So not that you're starting from scratch, but I would think you've got a pretty big blank slate, but you also need to do a little bit more digging to find the compelling stories. So if my premise is right there, kind of walk us through your process of finding the right subjects and how you build that relationship with them to translate it over to a piece of video content or podcast content that people will just love.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, finding the stories is just like we are the subject matter experts, right? And we meet the guys I work with, man, they're so knowledgeable. So we'd get in a room and throw 50 ideas at the wall, and then hey, okay, tell this guy's story. We know most of the stories are enough of them about the people we want to talk about, and we just or make phone calls. I mean, through talking to friends and people we know in the sport, figure out, oh man, this is a great story. He got screwed over at the World Championships. We need to tell his story. Or, this guy had to overcome drugs and whatnot. And then a lot of time the relationship building to do these, it takes place over the years, right? So by the time they sit in front of you in the chair and we got the lights on and everything, you don't have to build a rapport. That the trust is there. They know who we are. We know who they are. Let's just talk and have a conversation and get the story out of it. And then we have amazing editors and videographers who can put it all together.
And we're here for the sport of wrestling. We're here for the athlete. We're not here to attack them, right? And so they know that we believe in them, and we want to tell the great things about the our sports and the great stories. And so I think that is helps the wrestlers get comfortable with us, and all the athletes get comfortable with us, and also we're in it with them. We're track and field runners, we're cheerleaders, we're wrestlers, and we want to produce content the way that wrestlers or track and field or cheerleaders or hockey players want to the way they want to see it. And so it makes it that we're the first call. FloSports is the first call usually when they have a cool story or a coach has a cool story that he thinks the wrestling community would wanna see.
Yeah, like you're of the community and for the community. I can see where that really, really helps.
Sure. Built up twice, that you built, 20 years of reputation and trust, and, hopefully it continues to grow. Mark, you brought up, and I was actually surprised in your top three, is the cheer category. And, sometimes you don't think of cheer, quote unquote, as a sport, but there is definitely passion, athleticism, all the above. It checks those boxes. So
By the way, just something else. Tons of risk too.
Yeah,
Loads
yeah,
of it. Maybe
yeah.
Dad of a daughter who was a cheerleader. Tons of injuries too. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to. It's a tough sport.
Talk about what's happening with the varsity channel and the cheer category.
Yeah, I think that I was when I started Flow, or when we started Flow 20 years ago, I was in the same boat. I was
Yeah.
like, cheerleading's not a sport. But the more that you go to these competitions and you see what these, girls are doing, throwing their body around. If you think that the gymnastics floor routine is a sport, which I think everyone does, try having 15 of them do that at the same time. And the how much they work and how precise they need to be in terms of if they throw the girl up in the air and that they miss her, it's broken nose, broken leg. They are they are tough. And so those competitions, it's 2.5 minutes of like it's 2.5 minutes of energy and high risk maneuvers, and it's pretty impressive when you go to the competition and you see what those ladies can do.
And there's if I correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a professional league on the horizon for cheer.
Yeah, this year will be the first year varsity is starting a pro cheer league, and yeah, it's exciting. They are going to have, I believe it's 4 to 6 teams, and I think that you're gonna start to see how much it goes into a 2.5 minute competition and how intense it is and what preparation goes into it and how strong these ladies and gentlemen are.
Talk about the I was gonna say niche, and I don't think that's the right word. Maybe the gap or the need you were feeling. I mean, cheer is not a niche sport. It's hugely popular, but there's an audience out there for it too. And talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'm curious if you're out covering a cheer competition. The people watching it could be other cheerleaders and coaches, but are we also talking about families of the young men and women who are competing? What do those audiences look like, and how big a need did you find that there was when you first engaged with the sport?
In cheerleading specifically, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, I'm asking about cheerleading, but as I'm asking very much a think out loud question, as I was asking that question, yeah, I mean the same could apply to any sport. Like where are your audiences coming from, and do you find that you're drawing from outside the field of like athletes, former athletes, and coaches?
Yeah, I mean, well, first we want to be with the core, right? So we definitely want the athletes and the coaches, and to like our product, because as a fan of track and field and wrestling, nothing pisses you off more than when you watch it on a major broadcast and they don't know much about the sport. And so we definitely want to be authentic to the sport. And our belief is if we're authentic to the sport and we don't dumb it down, we'll actually grow the audience from the core. And, there are, we're reaching over 20 million people on our channels every month. And they've done tons of reports. This is over a $50 billion a year industry for emerging and youth sports, right? And so there are tens of millions of people, tens of millions of people in the United States alone that care about these sports, right? Obviously, if you look at high school participation, track and field is one of the largest, volleyball is the largest, marching band has more participants than football. So in terms of participation and dollars spent, it is people say it's niche, but $40 billion plus seems pretty big to me.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I said niche too, I caught myself on that right away. It's like it can be easy if you're from the outside of a sport to think that it's a niche, a very specific or a small audience. But the reality is, for a lot of these sports, just there's many of us who may not be looking, but there's a lot of other people who are, right? And I mean, it feels like that's what you guys have built an impressive business around offering what other people simply aren't, right? And there's a huge audience for it.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
It seems to be working.
Well, on that,
That's what me and Mark have been doing for 19 years.
Yeah.
well, on that, with your 19 years of experience, and I'd like to, this really question goes to both of you gentlemen. What's on the horizon? What should we be looking for? Are there some trends or up and coming sports that you guys in particular and FloSports in particular are keeping your eyes on?
Yeah, we're always looking for more sports. I'd say that, I mean, I know this might be a little like cliche, but as the first step change for the sport was the internet, right? Before the internet and streaming video, you had to find that 1 hour on ABC, or you had to wait every 4 years for the Olympics, and you really couldn't tell the story of the sport. You couldn't show the full 1500 because in a track and field race, or obviously not the 10K. You couldn't show all the matches leading up to a gold medal match. Well, the internet changed that, right? And so we could stream the whole track and field event. We could stream every single mat from a tournament. And so that was a huge step change for our sports. The next one here is AI. And we're already utilizing AI in terms of our camera capture and a virtual producer to actually create more content at higher quality. And so in wrestling, we just launched what we call our AI producer. So we have a camera and that automatically virtual pan and zoom to make the 40 mat competitions just a better quality. And we'll be rolling that out to more combat sports. We're in the process of doing that for also hockey. And so that is an important embrace that we have to make for our sports, because we need to make it so the quality continues to go up, but it becomes cheaper and cheaper for us to produce so we can put more and more content out there. And then, in terms of sports, we're looking at a variety of sports from cricket to lacrosse, more dance competitions. And so we think there's 50 plus sports where it could work for FloSports.
When you're researching new sports, new lines of business, are you looking at participation? Are you looking at just simply what's not being covered? I'm sure both of those things and other factors play in. But what are the elements that you weigh? What does it take for something to grab your attention?
Yeah, so participation is large. The number of media companies is large. We kind of talk about that passion index, right? The passion index for wrestling. No one goes and joins a wrestling team and gets their loses and then comes back. Like, you really have to be in it for wrestling, right? And so we look at those passion indexes, right? Are you just kind of jogging a marathon, or are you in these sports? And so that weighs heavily. And then if we're needed, right? We're not, people ask us, oh, are you going to continue to try to go up and be higher level college, or pro sports like the NFL? And it's like, no, we're not needed there. There's enough people there. They do a great job. And, flow's not needed there. We like to go where we're needed, where we can bring value and where the customers and the fans will be, praising that we're there. And so those are kind of sports we go into.
Okay, pure curiosity question. Are there sports that you would love to do, but you just can't seem to be able to make it work? Maybe even just because it's too hard to shoot it in a cost-effective way. Is there something you wish you could get to, but you haven't figured it out yet?
I mean, there's definitely sports where we look at it and be like, no, that's just too difficult right now. Obviously, the production costs are too hard. Golf is a big one. It's just very difficult, and who knows? Maybe technology, we'll have drones following people, AI drones following everyone, and doing live streams from that at some point. But it's still too difficult right now, and so those types of long competitions outdoors can be challenging.
What about water
I was
sports?
gonna
Or
say,
other-
I was
yeah.
gonna say, sailing seems like
Surfing,
it might,
yeah.
might fit into that category.
Yeah.
Yeah, sailing and surfing. I mean, if you know, there's not many people that know more about these, you call them niche or kind of off the cuff sports than I do, and the people at Flow. But surfing is one where they don't really know when the competition is, and the waves have to come in, and so it's like a 1 week stretch of
Right.
being at this beach, and yeah, that's a lot of production days, and that's a lot of cost, and you're like, okay, is it gonna actually turn out or not turn out? And so. Those are important factors because, for us, it is important that we have a business model that works because then it allows us to kind of control our own destiny and then be able to continue to invest in our sports. And so, understanding all the costs are important. And so, some of those sports, outdoor sports, weird formats, can be challenging at this time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey guys, as we wrap this up, I want to make sure that all of our listeners know what to look for on Flow Sports. So I guess I'll shoot this over to Bader. Kind of what's on the platform now? What are you excited about? And if someone's coming to Flow Sports, where do they start?
It depends what you want. I can speak. I work like almost strictly with wrestling, right? So I'll speak to that. And I mean, we stream everything, not everything, but every level. We don't stream the NCAA championships and we don't stream the Olympics, but most other, we stream the world championships, we stream college conference championships, and we have documentaries, rankings, analysis, podcasts. I mean, and this is, you guys kind of touched on earlier, we're an inch wide and a mile deep, right? And anything you want to know about wrestling, we're your go-to place.
Well,
And obviously the social channels are huge, right?
yeah,
Instagram,
yeah.
YouTube, all that.
Well, I want to make sure they tune into the Iowa Hawkeyes series because that's one that I think touches checks a few boxes and touches on a few emotions.
And I'll second that. So
you
you don't need to be in the
Right.
wrestling community to enjoy that series too.
Right.
I mean that if you're a sports fan or if you care just about people following their dreams, like there's something there for you.
Absolutely. We follow this team, but really it's driven more by the athletes and the people on the team and their stories and their journeys. And they come from different places and have different challenges in their lives, have dealt with loss. So really it's about these young ladies on the team and then with the wrestling backdrop and, the wrestlers and you see them compete kind of more towards the end of the episode. But it's really a really well done piece about the people who make up the team. For
Yeah,
sure.
It's about the launch of the Iowa women's wrestling program. So it was the first year that Iowa had women's Division I wrestling. So it's a pretty awesome story, and to be able to follow around them for year one and hear their stories is pretty inspirational.
Yeah, Mark, especially with the legacy of the men's program, right? It was about time that the women were represented on the mat in Iowa.
Absolutely. And the women they're running off doing awesome. They won national titles in their first 2 seasons. So great start.
Something with that black and yellow, huh?
Exactly.
And I mean, just to put a bow on this series, we don't know how this series is going to turn out, right? You kind of hope they win, but you follow the drama and you make the thing however it goes. It came down to it couldn't have been, you couldn't have scripted it better. It was the last match of the tournament, the two best wrestlers of any weight classes from the two best teams winner take all, and
Don't
Iowa.
tell them what happens.
I was going to say spoiler alert here for everybody.
Spoiler alert, but yeah, it's just phenomenal. It's played out like a movie.
Well,
I'd
and
say that
go ahead,
on.
Mark.
I was just going to say, in terms of, obviously we're top in wrestling, but if you're a hockey fan, please, we got the OHL, the Q, some of the best hockey up and coming prospects, the USHL, obviously the AHL and the ECHL, and motorsports. We have Kyle Busch racing at the Snowball Derby at the beginning of December. We have which is one of the most fun motorsports events of the year in mid-January, called the Chili Bowl. It's indoors, and we're going to have NASCAR champion Kyle Larson, Christian Bell from NASCAR. There's Indy drivers, and they're racing on this small track indoors. There's a bunch of flips. And so if you're a motorsports fan, if you're a cheerleading fan, you know, basically all the competitions. And at the end of January, UCA, NDA, we have the college championships, which is always a lot of fun. So, you know, whatever your sport is, we got something for you at Flow.
That's great. Hey guys, I want to thank you, and just for our listeners, Flow Sports. You'll dive in, and you'll definitely find a passion there for you to follow and to tune into. So Mark, as in Bader, thank you for joining us on Skin in the Game, and can't wait to follow you as you hit your 21st birthday next year.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks guys. Really appreciate it.
No, you got it. Thank you guys.
Hey, welcome back to Skin in the Game. And again, we want to thank Mark from Flow Sports for joining us. Really interesting conversation with the founder and the lead producer over at Flow Sports.
Yeah, that was a nice combination of people too. It's always great to have the founder of a big entity like that, and a still growing entity. And then, you know, so that of course is Mark Floreani, and then Mark Bader being able to go so deep on his coverage of wrestling.
Right.
Just fascinating.
Well, and I love
fascinating to hear how they do it.
Well, and again, I think we hit on the word authenticity 2 or 3 times, and I wanted to emphasize that because, you know, the founders and the producers at Flow Sports are first and foremost, you know, either fans or in many cases former athletes who have true, authentic passions in these sports. And you know something? That comes through in the content. I think that comes through to the interviewees, or in this case, the rights holders or the athletes. And I think that's really what differentiates Flow Sports from, again, I'm not knocking ESPN or not knocking Fox or Paramount, but in many ways, Tim, you know, they're in it for the ratings and the money.
And they're going for the general audience too, which I mean, and all of those things, John, as you know, go together, right? I think that there's something really cool and authentic, I think is a great word for it, about watching people who absolutely love a sport and have lived and played and, you know, coached that sport, tell the stories about that sport, but not just their own stories. I mean, sitting down like a journalist would and pulling those stories out of other people. It's you know, it's the same thing too. And you've been interviewed by a bunch of journalists. When you get somebody, a sports writer who played a sport at a high level, which is kind of rare, but when you get that, you get and I'm not one of them, but you get a different feel for it, right? Than somebody who's coming in from the outside as more of an observer. Right.
It's interesting too, is because we spoke a little bit to Mark Bader even pre-interview. And he didn't come to Flow Sports as a producer. And, you know, it's like even the way kind of, you know, you and I talk about careers in sports and just careers in general, you know. And I think Mark Floreani recognized that too, is, you know, you can train camera work, you can train editing, but you can't train passion. And so, you know, a lot of their people come from the sport and that's innate, the passion. And they'll find the skills or learn the skills.
Oh, for sure. And you can hear it in Bader's voice. And, you know, for people out there listening and watching to us now, as John said, we had a pre-interview with Mark Bader and you know, someone else from Flow Sports last week, just to set this up. And we don't always do pre-interviews here on Skin in the Game, but we touch base in some form with our guests ahead of time. And in this case, it was a full Zoom conversation before the one we had just now. And even in that conversation, when we started talking wrestling, you could hear it in Bader's voice. Just the energy goes up, the tone goes up, the pitch gets a little bit higher. I am not specifically a wrestling fan. I admire it, but I'm not a viewer. And I certainly never participated in the sport. Hearing him talk about it, and especially watching the piece where he had his daughter meet the athletes from the Iowa Hawkeyes, young women on that college team, and see how it inspired his daughter. I started seeing the sport as, he did as an athlete, but also even more so him as a dad. His daughter is, a child who's proud of what her dad does, but didn't really understand it until she experienced it.
Right.
So it really hits you on a human level, and that comes from loving the sport. It starts with loving the sport.
Well, and as I told you early on, when we opened up this episode of Skin in the Game, I've been around the sport of wrestling for a long time. Wasn't a wrestler per se, but the schools I went to and the friends I have come deep rooted in wrestling, and let's just say they're a very special breed. And in a good way, because the dedication, the commitment, the passion. I thought it was big in hockey. I thought it was big in rugby. But wrestling, they're a different breed. The sacrifices you make, and I think that comes through in the programming that comes out of FloSports, and obviously with Mark Bader's passion for it.
Well, there's something too about wrestling, and again, I say this very much from the outside. And I had an uncle who was a passionate wrestling coach and tried to get me to be part of the sport. You're out there individually, so you have to learn a lot about reading other people and relying on yourself and all of those kinds of lessons. But then you're part of a team, so you're doing your own individual piece to help a team succeed, right? And you and I could go down a long path about what you learn from different sports. But wrestling, you get all of that, and there's another piece to it too, I think, and you can push back on me because you're closer to it. There's not a lot of glamour in wrestling. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's that brotherhood or sisterhood of being on the team with your teammates. But there's very, very little chance in wrestling, especially pre-FloSports or before this level of coverage, for people really to know who you are. There wasn't a major platform other than the Olympics every 4 years to aspire to, right? You really got to love that sport to want to do it.
Yeah, right. So as we wrap this up, is there a sport? I'm going to put you on the spot here, Tim. Is there a sport that you'd like to see FloSports cover, or maybe cover more? And then I'll give you my answer.
Well, you want me to say? I know you want me to say flag football with
anybody,
but it's not, because that with the NFL behind it, flag football is well positioned to get coverage. No, I alluded to it in one of my questions there for Mark Floreani. It's actually surfing. I am an aspiring surfer to this day. I've gotten up on a board exactly once.
The shores of Lake Erie, a great place to surf.
You can.
I know you can.
But John lived in Los Angeles for 5-6 years. Yeah. So John knows the surf culture well, at least from being a resident there. I could sit and watch surfing all day.
Yeah, that's cool.
So FloSports wants to figure out a way to do that in a way that's economically viable.
Yeah,
I'll be a subscriber right away for that.
That's great. That's great.
How about you?
Well, for me, and I alluded to it, and Flo does have rugby. I just think rugby, with its growth in high schools, and its evolution here in the United States, I think the more people that can be exposed to rugby and the constant action and the physicality and again the passion, I'd like to see and continue to grow rugby, because again it's a great sport,
and that'll help with participation. There is a lot of participation now, but one can feed the other, unlike surfing, where I don't know you're gonna get a lot more people out surfing by covering it. You'll get some. There's some geographical limitations admittedly, but rugby it would be great. And that's why I didn't say flag football too, by the way. People, thank you again to the National Football League, people know about flag football. They do. Right. Rugby, and there's a handful of other sports out there that are great, that are growing, but more people need to know. So it would be great to see that kick up.
And with that, I'd like to thank Mark Floreani and Mark Bader from FloSports for joining us here on Skin in the Game. Until next time.